My name is Helen McAllister, 72 years old, widow of George McAllister, the man whose funeral I stood through with my spine straight and my hands clasped tight so no one could see them tremble. The church smelled like lilies and cold wax, the kind of scent that pretends to be comforting but really just tells you something beautiful has died. People whispered in the pews, all sympathy and small talk. "She looks composed," someone said. They didn't know I was holding my breath. On the third pew, George's son Andrew leaned toward his wife Melissa, both dressed in black, a shade too polished for grief. Their whispers cut through the organ hymn like fine glass. "Make sure she doesn't see the papers until after we file," Andrew murmured. "She won't understand anyway," Melissa answered. I froze. They didn't bother to lower their voices enough. I was the she, the woman who had cared for their father through his last months, the one who balanced his medication, kept the oxygen tank running, paid for the nurse when insurance refused, the woman who shared 48 years of mornings, bills, and small forgivenesses. But at his funeral, I was suddenly the outsider. Andrew had been cordial when George was alive. Polite calls on birthdays, quick texts around Christmas. The moment the casket was closed, that politeness curdled into ownership. I watched him walk up to the pulpit, shake hands with the pastor, and begin his eulogy. His voice was smooth, rehearsed. "Dad taught us the value of legacy," he said. "He always told me the McAllister home should stay in the bloodline." The words hit like cold water. Legacy, bloodline. I looked around. A few heads turned my way, soft, pitying eyes, the kind that said maybe she'll have to move out now. Melissa's hand rested over Andrew's sleeve. Her nails gleamed red against his cuff. She smiled when the congregation bowed their heads. It wasn't grief I felt then. It was clarity. George had trusted them with the lawyer's contact, the safe deposit keys, the documents, all under the pretense of helping him organize. He believed they'd honor his word. I knew better now. When the hymn ended, I approached the casket. My palm brushed the polished wood. Beneath it lay the man who once said, "Helen, if anything ever happens to me, you'll be safe." Safe. I turned slightly and met Andrew's eyes. He looked away first. That told me everything I needed. I left the church before anyone could hand me another sympathy card. The air outside was brittle, cold enough to sting my lungs. Snow fell in slow, steady flakes, the kind that covers tracks. I whispered to the wind, "You tried to bury him, but you buried the wrong thing." Because that was the moment I knew. If they thought I'd go quietly, they hadn't met the version of me that grief sharpens. This story doesn't begin with death. It begins with the line they crossed trying to erase me, and the will they never meant for me to read. The next morning, I showed up at the McAllister house. Or rather, the house that everyone suddenly acted like wasn't mine anymore. The driveway was already filled with cars, some I didn't even recognize. Inside, laughter echoed where mourning should have been. Andrew was in the dining room, sleeves rolled up, passing out envelopes to his cousins like they were invitations. Melissa stood by the sideboard, arranging pastries on a platter she'd bought that morning. A woman too busy hosting to be grieving. I stepped into the room, still in black, clutching my handbag like armor. The laughter died as soon as they saw me. "Mom," Andrew started. "Helen," Melissa corrected softly, resting a manicured hand on his arm. That one word stung more than it should have. I smiled the kind of smile you wear when your heart's gone cold. "I didn't realize there was a family meeting. No one told me." Andrew cleared his throat. "It's just paperwork, Mom. Dad's estate, funeral costs, all that." "Funny," I said. "Paperwork doesn't usually require a crowd." Melissa shot him a look, the kind that said, "Don't lose your temper yet." He sighed. "Look, Dad wanted everything to be handled smoothly. He told me before he passed that the house should stay in the family. You know, the McAllister name." I tilted my head. "I see. And what am I, Andrew? The help who outstayed her welcome?" His face flushed. "No one's saying that." I took a step closer. "Then what exactly are you saying?" He hesitated. That's when Melissa slid a folder across the table. "George left instructions. We'll handle the financial side and you'll be comfortable, Helen. You'll have a monthly allowance." A monthly allowance like a pet. I didn't even open the folder. And this was drafted by which attorney? Uh, well, Andrew stammered. Mr. Benton had the papers. He said Dad signed them a few weeks before. Before he couldn't even hold a pen? I interrupted. The room went silent. The cousins looked away. One of them coughed into his sleeve. I stared right at Melissa. You forged his signature. Her mouth opened, then closed. That's a serious accusation, Helen. So is theft, I said, my voice steady. But we're past courtesy, aren't we? Andrew slammed his hand on the table. Enough. You're tired. Grief's messing with your head. No, Andrew, I said quietly. Grief clears my head. It shows me who you are. He exhaled hard, shoulders tensing. We're not doing this here. Then where would you like to do it? At the lawyer's office? Or the bank where the safe deposit box is registered under both our names? That made him flinch. I saw it. The half-second panic of a man who thought his secret was still safe. Melissa smoothed her dress, forcing calm. Helen, we'll make sure you're taken care of. We just need to move forward with the filings. George wanted peace. I leaned forward. Peace isn't what you want. Control is. For the first time, her mask cracked. I think you should leave, Andrew said. I nodded slowly, grabbed the folder, and tucked it under my arm. You're right. But next time I come back, Andrew, I'll bring someone who won't call me Helen. He'll call me Mrs. McAllister, because that's the name still printed on the deed you're trying to erase. I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, Melissa whispered something frantic. Chairs scraped. I didn't look back. Outside, the wind had picked up, cold enough to carry the echo of George's voice in my memory. You'll be safe. I whispered, not yet, love, but soon. By Friday, the calls started, polite at first, then sharp, then threatening. Mrs. McAllister, a voice from the law firm said, your stepson has requested authorization to transfer the estate funds for probate. We just need your confirmation on file. I laughed into the phone, short and humorless. Tell him my confirmation will come from a judge, not a signature. The woman hesitated. Ma'am, he's already provided notarized consent. Under whose name? Yours. The silence that followed was enough to make my blood turn cold. They hadn't wasted a day. The ink on George's death certificate was barely dry, and they'd already copied my signature onto documents I'd never seen. That afternoon, when I stopped by the church to collect George's donation receipts, Pastor Allen took my hand gently. Helen, I don't know the details, but Andrew told the congregation you'll be moving soon. Said the house was part of his father's legacy plan. I felt the air drain from my lungs. He told the church that? The pastor nodded, uneasy. He asked if we could help you find a senior apartment. I assumed you'd agreed. I didn't answer. I just walked out, past the stained glass, past the altar flowers that were already wilting. When I got home, the mailbox was crammed with letters, insurance forms, a property reassignment notice, and a thin envelope stamped Bank of Franklin County. I opened it carefully. Your name has been removed as co-owner from account ending in 4732. Removed. I gripped the edge of the counter until my knuckles went white. My name, the one George wrote in his will, the one carved next to his on our mailbox, was being erased one line at a time. I called Andrew. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. Then came a text. Mom, please stop. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Dad's estate needs closure. Closure. That word again. They used it like bleach to wipe me away neatly. By Sunday, I found myself sitting alone at the kitchen table, the one George had built with his hands. Every scratch in the wood felt like his fingerprint. The phone was silent. No family, no comfort, just silence loud enough to rattle. I thought about the last few months, how Melissa had insisted on helping with the bills, how Andrew had volunteered to manage the bank transfers. Back then, I was grateful. I'd been tired from hospital visits and the endless cycle of hope and decline. Now I saw it for what it was. Groundwork. They'd prepared this long before George passed. The forged signature wasn't an act of desperation. It was a plan executed with precision. I looked across the table at the empty chair. You warned me once about wolves in the family, I whispered. You were right. The next morning, I visited the bank myself. The teller, a young woman named Crystal, frowned at her screen. I'm sorry, Mrs. McAllister, but this account was reclassified last week. You'll need to speak with the estate manager, Andrew McAllister. Her voice softened when she saw my expression. Ma'am, if something's wrong, I can print the signature log for you. Do it, I said quietly. When she slid the page across the counter, I saw it immediately. My name, in handwriting that almost matched mine, but not quite. The H was too tall. The S looped wrong. I folded the paper neatly and placed it in my purse. Thank you, dear. By the time I stepped outside, snow had started falling again, thicker this time. I pulled my coat tighter and whispered into the cold air, You stole my name once. Now I'll take yours. And that's when I knew exactly what my next move would be. The night the locks changed, I was still wearing my house slippers. It was a Tuesday, one of those dull gray evenings where the streetlights hum before the sky goes fully dark. I had just returned from the grocery store. Bread, milk, and George's favorite marmalade, which I still bought out of habit. But when I tried to fit my key into the front door, it wouldn't turn. I twisted again. The metal scraped but didn't catch. From inside came voices, laughter, a TV blaring. Melissa's laugh, high, practiced, perfectly shaped for a dinner party. I knocked once, then again louder. After a long pause, the door cracked open. Andrew stood there, shirt sleeves rolled up, wine glass in hand. He looked surprised, but not enough. Mom, what are you doing here? What am I laughed softly. This is my home, Andrew. He glanced over his shoulder. We changed the locks. It's complicated, legal procedure. Behind him, I saw Melissa setting the table, the crystal glasses glinting under the chandelier I'd polished 1,000 times. A roast sat steaming on the platter I'd bought on our 25th anniversary. My throat tightened. You're hosting dinner in my house. Melissa didn't turn around. It's easier for everyone this way, Helen. Less confusion. I stared at the threshold, 1 inch of wood between what used to be mine and what they'd taken. Where are my things? Andrew sighed. We packed up your clothes. Melissa's brother took them to a storage unit. You mean the attic of someone else's pity? He frowned. Don't do this. Do what? Exist? For a moment, something like guilt flickered in his eyes. Then he hardened. You'll get your stipend once the estate closes. It's not personal. That was the sentence that broke something inside me. Not personal. Everything about it was personal. Every late night, every hospital bill, every morning I woke before sunrise to make sure George could breathe. I'd been his wife, his caregiver, his partner in every battle. Now I was just an obstacle in a tidy inheritance plan. I stepped back slowly, the cold biting through my slippers. Tell Melissa the roast will dry out if she keeps it that close to the heat, I said quietly, then turned away. Snow had begun to fall again, catching in my hair. I walked to the car, the only thing still in my name, and sat there until my fingers stopped shaking. When I finally drove away, I didn't go home. I didn't have one anymore. That night, I checked into a cheap roadside motel off Route 19. The sheets smelled faintly of bleach and old perfume. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floral wallpaper peeling in the corners. The lamp flickered once, then steadied. I pulled the folded bank paper from my purse, my forged signature staring back at me, and placed it beside George's wedding photo. His smile in that picture had always been easy, trusting. I should have paid more attention, I whispered. You always said Andrew's charm could talk a fox out of its tail. The silence that followed was heavier than any sermon. I don't remember falling asleep, only waking up hours later to the sound of rain tapping against the window. For the first time in 48 years, I realized no one knew where I was, and no one cared to ask. That realization didn't make me cry. It made me still, completely still. Because stillness isn't weakness. It's the space where rage learns how to think. By morning, I wasn't broken anymore, just focused. And by the time the sun rose over the motel parking lot, I had one thought so clear it felt like a vow. If they took everything that bore my name, I'd make sure my name was the last thing left standing. At sunrise, I drove to the only door I knew would open, Evelyn Hart's townhouse. Evelyn had been George's closest friend since college and a bulldog of an attorney until she retired. She answered in a wool robe, eyes clear as ever. "Breakfast or battle?" she asked. "Both," I said, holding up the forged signature log. 10 minutes later, we sat at her kitchen island with black coffee and a yellow legal pad. I laid out everything: the church whispers, the allowance, the lock change, the transfer forms. Evelyn read silently, lips tightening with each page. She tapped the paper. "This H isn't yours. Whoever did it practiced, but not enough." "I want my life back," I said. "And I want them to stop using George's name like a crowbar." Evelyn slid her glasses higher. "First, preservation. We freeze anything they're trying to move. Second, proof. We find the real will. George told me he kept copies where idiots can't reach: bank vaults and backs of books." "Backs of books?" She stood crossed to a shelf and pulled down an old casebook. Inside the hollowed spine lay an envelope labeled in George's careful hand, for Helen if needed. My breath caught. Evelyn opened it. Out slid a small key, a deposit box number, and a sticky note. "If Andrew pushes, trust the vault. G." My hands shook, but not from fear. "The bank's downtown. Box access requires 2 IDs and the key." "And the widow is the widow," Evelyn said, already grabbing her coat. "Let's go." At Franklin County Bank, the vault manager checked my ID, compared signatures, then led us to the steel drawers. The key turned with a weighty click. Inside the narrow box lay a manila folder, a USB drive, and George's fountain pen. I opened the folder. On top, in bold letters, "Last Will and Testament of George A. McAllister, reaffirmed with video statement. Witnessed, notarized, dates from 6 months earlier, months before the hospital morphine, long before the shaky hands." The bequest section was short and bright as a match. The house, the joint accounts, the library, the pension survivor benefit, to Helen Marie McAllister. I closed my eyes. A breath I hadn't known I was holding finally left me. Evelyn squeezed my arm. "That USB, we plugged it into a bank computer in a private room." George appeared on screen, sitting straight, voice steady. "If you're watching this, it means I can't answer questions. So here are my answers. My wife Helen has my home, my accounts, my library, not out of charity, but because marriage is the longest ledger I ever kept. Andrew, if you're pushing, stop. Melissa, if you're coaching, don't. Pastor Allen, if they're arguing, remind them I gave my word." Evelyn exhaled. "That's your canon." We made certified copies, requested the notary's journal, and filed a hold notice with the probate clerk. Evelyn dictated like a general. "Emergency motion to stay transfers. Notice to counsel, if there is real counsel. Letter to Pastor Allen, so the narrative flips. And we schedule a memorial reception at the church next week. You will bring flowers and truth." I blinked. "At the memorial?" "Yes," she said. "They staged the funeral as a takeover. We staged the memorial as a correction. You won't shout. You'll play George's video and read 2 paragraphs. Then you'll hand the clerk the certified will in front of witnesses. People remember what happens in churches." "What about the house?" Evelyn smiled thinly. "We record an affidavit of survivorship on the deed by noon. They can change locks on doors. Not on county records." By late afternoon, the filings were stamped, the deed fix recorded. Pastor Allen emailed, astonished but supportive. I carried the manila folder pressed to my chest, George's pen clipped to the lapel of my coat like a medal. On the drive back to the motel, snow feathered across the windshield. I wasn't homeless anymore, not in law, not in truth. They had tried to bury me in paperwork. I had dug up a vault. That night, I wrote 3 lines on Evelyn's legal pad, neat and even. "Memorial Tuesday, 6 p.m., USB queued, copies on every pew." I don't raise my voice. The evidence will. Then I set George's pen on the nightstand and slept like a woman with a plan. Tuesday came faster than I expected. The sky hung low, the color of tarnished silver, and the town moved slow under the kind of cold that made every breath visible. At noon, Evelyn and I parked outside the county clerk's office. The glass doors reflected a woman I barely recognized. Gray hair, pinned back tight, coat buttoned like armor, George's fountain pen still on my lapel. Inside, I signed the affidavit of survivorship. The clerk stamped it twice, the sound sharp as a hammer. With that, my name was back where it belonged. On the title, on the record, in ink the law couldn't erase. Evelyn smiled. Congratulations, Mrs. McAllister. The locks they changed don't matter anymore. The land answers to paper, not pity. Next stop was the florist. I ordered one arrangement of white lilies and one of red roses. The lilies were for George. The roses were for the living, bright enough to make the guilty sweat. By 4 p.m., the church hall was ready. Evelyn coordinated with Pastor Allen, who agreed to host a short family remembrance for George's friends and parishioners. Word spread fast. By evening, nearly everyone who'd attended the funeral was coming again, including Andrew and Melissa. That was exactly the point. I dressed in the same black coat I'd worn to the funeral. I wanted them to think I was still mourning. Evelyn handled the details: projector, speakers, printed copies of the certified will in sealed envelopes for witnesses. At 5:45, we stood near the entrance. The sound of footsteps echoed down the marble hall as guests trickled in, shaking off snow and politeness. I spotted Andrew first, confident, phone in hand, Melissa beside him like a trophy on a leash. They looked confused. "What is this, Mom?" Andrew asked. "Another service?" I smiled. "A correction." Melissa's eyes narrowed. "You shouldn't be here." Pastor Allen's voice cut through, warm and steady. "She should be exactly here." Andrew's jaw clenched. "You told the pastor." "I told the truth," I said simply. The service began softly. Hymn, brief prayer, a few memories from neighbors who still remembered George as the man who fixed broken fences and read poetry on rainy days. Then, before anyone could wrap it up, Evelyn stepped to the lectern. "Before we close," she said, "Mrs. McAllister would like to share something George left for her. And for all of you." The projector hummed to life. The lights dimmed. George's face filled the screen. He sat in his favorite chair, library books stacked behind him. His voice came steady through the speakers. "If you're watching this, I must already be gone. Helen, my wife, stood beside me through every illness and every ledger. The home we built together is hers. The accounts, hers. The decisions, hers. Andrew, Melissa, this isn't punishment, it's order." The room froze. Every breath seemed to stop midair. Melissa gripped Andrew's sleeve, whispering, "Turn it off." He rose, fumbling toward the projector, but Evelyn blocked him with one hand. "Sit down, Mr. McAllister. This is a public reading under state law." Gasps scattered through the pews. Phones lifted to record. I stayed seated, silent, eyes on the screen. "If anyone questions my intent," George continued, "they'll find a notarized copy in safe deposit box 482 at Franklin County Bank, and if someone has tampered with my wife's name, the video itself shall speak as witness." When the clip ended, the lights came up slowly. I stood, smoothing my coat. "You said he wanted legacy, Andrew. Well, here it is." Andrew's face was pale, his lips tight. "You had no right to—" I cut him off. "No, you had no right. To forge, to lie, to lock me out of my own house." Murmurs filled the church. Someone whispered, "Did they really forge it?" Another voice answered, "Looks like she's got proof." Melissa's glare could have melted glass. "You'll regret humiliating us like this." I met her eyes. "You mistake humiliation for justice. That's your problem." Evelyn handed out the certified copies to Pastor Allen and the parish board. "Witness acknowledgement," she said. "You've all seen it. The record stands." Andrew looked ready to speak, but Pastor Allen raised a hand. "The truth is already spoken, son." I turned back toward the crowd. Hands steady now. That was my husband's voice, and that is my home. I don't want revenge. I want restoration. But as I watched Andrew's pride collapse in front of everyone he'd tried to impress, I realized revenge and restoration sometimes sound the same. By sunrise the next morning, the video had already spread beyond the church. Someone from the congregation had posted it on Facebook with the caption, "Widow exposes forged will at husband's memorial." It was shared over 2,000 times before breakfast. By noon, I had 3 voicemails from reporters and one from a local news anchor asking for an interview. I didn't answer. I didn't need to speak. George already had. But Andrew couldn't stay silent. At 10 a.m., he appeared on the porch of my house with the deed now officially recorded in my name again. I saw his car from the window and let him knock for a full minute before opening the door. He looked different. The arrogance had cracked. The edges were frantic now. His tie hung loose, hair uncombed. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. "Now it's Mom again," I replied softly. "Interesting." He stepped inside without waiting to be invited. "You've destroyed me. That video made me a criminal in front of the whole town." "You did that yourself," I said. "All I did was press play." He slammed his palm on the table, making the sugar bowl jump. "You could have come to me privately. We could have handled it within the family." I met his eyes. "You handled it within the family when you locked me out of my house?" He froze, words catching on guilt. "It was Melissa's idea. She said—" "Stop!" My voice came out low, sharp. "A grown man signs his own name, Andrew, or forges someone else's. Either way, he's responsible." He sank into a chair, head in his hands. "They're investigating now. The bank called. There's talk of charges. Mom, I can't—" "Don't call me Mom when it's convenient." The silence stretched. He looked up slowly, eyes red-rimmed. "You really hate me that much?" I shook my head. Hate would mean I still expected better. From the doorway, a voice cut in. "He deserves everything coming." It was Evelyn holding a folder. She'd arrived quietly as usual. "I just came from the county prosecutor's office. They're opening a case for forgery and unauthorized transfer. The bank statements, Helen. Your copies sealed it." Andrew's mouth fell open. "You filed charges?" Evelyn didn't blink. "No, the state did. Your father's name was on those accounts. Fraud against a deceased person carries prison time." He shot me a look full of panic. "Mom, please, call them off, please." I folded my hands. If I call anyone, it'll be a locksmith, to change these locks back to their rightful owner's keys. He stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. "You'll regret this." "No," I said. "You will, because when you chose greed over decency, you forgot who taught you the value of truth." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the window rattled. Evelyn exhaled, tension releasing like air from a valve. "I give it 48 hours before he tries to apologize publicly," she said. She was wrong. It took 24. The next evening, my phone buzzed with a message from the local news page. "Andrew McAllister issues statement, apologizing to stepmother over estate dispute." The video showed him stiff and pale beside Melissa, who looked like she'd swallowed glass. "We made mistakes. Grief clouded our judgment," he said. "We're grateful the matter is being resolved peacefully." Peacefully, that word again. They were still trying to control the narrative, but the public had already picked sides. Comments poured in. Good for her. Finally, an older woman standing up for herself. "This should be a movie," Evelyn called that night. "You realize you're trending locally?" I smiled faintly. "Good, maybe it'll remind a few sons that widows read fine print too." We sat in silence for a while, then she asked, "How do you feel?" I looked out the window where the snow glowed faintly under the porch light. "Like I'm finally visible," I said. "They buried my name in paperwork, but I dug it back up and planted it where everyone could see." Evelyn laughed softly. "Then this is your turning point." "No," I corrected gently. "This is theirs." Because sometimes justice doesn't roar, it just keeps showing up, quiet, steady, undeniable, until guilt has nowhere left to hide. 2 weeks later, the courthouse smelled of paper, coffee, and consequence. I sat at the long wooden table beside Evelyn, binder open, every document neatly tabbed. Across from us, Andrew and Melissa whispered to their lawyer, faces pale under the fluorescent light. Judge Raines adjusted her glasses. "Mrs. McAllister," she said evenly, "thank you for your cooperation during this process. Based on the certified recordings, bank statements, and verified witness signatures, the court recognizes your ownership of the McAllister estate and accounts in full." She turned toward Andrew. "As for the forged documents, Mr. McAllister, you're fortunate your stepmother declined to press additional charges. The court still recommends restitution for her legal costs." Andrew swallowed. Melissa stared at the table, mascara smudged. The gavel fell once. Bang! case closed. Outside the courthouse, snow was falling again, soft, quiet, almost kind. Reporters stood near the steps, microphones ready, cameras blinking red. Evelyn leaned close. You don't owe them a single word, but I walked forward anyway. A reporter called out, Mrs. McAllister, do you have any comment for other widows going through this? I stopped. Yes, I said steady. Never assume silence keeps the peace. It only keeps you erased. The microphones dropped lower, but I was already walking away. That night, I returned to the house, the same doorway where I once stood locked out in slippers. The smell of pine from the front wreath filled the air. The house looked smaller somehow. Or maybe I'd just grown into the space George always said was mine. In the living room, I lit the fireplace. The flames licked the air gently, warm but not loud. On the mantel, I placed the original will, framed between glass panes not as a trophy but as a reminder. Next to it sat George's pen, its gold nib catching the light. I brewed tea the way he liked it, strong, no sugar, and sat by the window overlooking the snow. Somewhere in town, Andrew was facing the ruin of his own making. Melissa's boutique had already closed. Their apology interview had done nothing but confirm what everyone already knew, but I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt whole. The phone rang once. It was Andrew. I let it go to voicemail. His message came through moments later, voice cracking. I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. I just didn't think you'd fight back. I stared at the phone a long time before whispering, that's the problem. You never thought. Then I deleted the message. Later, I opened my ledger, the one George used to tease me about, where I tracked grocery budgets and gas receipts. I turned to a fresh page and wrote one line in red ink. Balance restored. Paid in truth. The fire popped softly behind me. Through the window, the neighborhood glowed with porch lights and quiet peace. I wasn't angry anymore, just certain. For years, I'd lived as if decency would protect me, but decency without boundaries is just permission in disguise. And sometimes the kindest thing a woman can do is stop forgiving people who mistake her silence for surrender. I closed the ledger, turned off the lamp, and whispered to the empty room, Rest easy, George. They can't touch what you built anymore. The house settled around me with a familiar sigh, the kind of peace that comes not from forgetting, but from finally being remembered. I didn't win because I fought louder. I won because I refused to vanish. A month later, I began volunteering at the county library again, cataloging books, helping children with reading hours. A young girl asked if I'd ever written a story myself. I smiled. Not yet, I said, but maybe someday I will. And maybe I already had, because my story was written not in ink, but in the things they tried to erase and failed. If you've listened this far, thank you. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Stories Women 65 Plus USA, because stories like mine deserve to be heard.